Hello friends, for today's video we're going to be looking at episodes 13 through 18 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Before jumping into any specifics, just a heads up that my dog Luna Bear is nearby. She's currently licking her paws a lot, but you might hear her or maybe see her if she circles around at some point, but she kind of, now that I think about it, she looks like a dog version of Frieren, a little bit. Up until this point, there has been something I've noted that I was a little unsure how I felt about, but having thought about it, I really think it suits the show, which is oftentimes it's not just that this feels episodic, but rather it almost feels like each individual episode sometimes is split into two different little plot lines. And as a result, it does mean that you have a lot of things happen in small increments, you could say. But why I think this ended up working really well and why it fits the themes of the story, it kind of comes down to that quote about how Frieren 1/100th of her life, which was the 10 years that she spent with her original party, we'll say, who saved everybody from the Demon King. While, yes, it was 1/100th of her life, you do see Aizen note that even 1/100th was enough to change her. And so I think so much of the show is showing the ways that the little things are what really have an impact on us and the way those little things build, as opposed to what you usually see in stories, which is these monumental events and suddenly somebody's entire worldview shifts. While those things can be possible, there are very few stories that actually take the time to show the little ways that we come to grow as people and we come to change as individuals. So I think by having so many little moments, even crammed into one single episode, I think having that really exemplifies the themes. That said, as somebody who really likes to dig in, I actually do enjoy when we spend more time with any one given person or plotline, and so I don't think it's a negative that the show hasn't had that much of it. I just do find I enjoy those sorts of things, and I think in last week's, I really was excited about the arc where you had the various different demons that were trying to get into the city, and there was that amazing fight between our heroes and those characters. I really enjoyed that arc. Then we've kind of returned to almost more slice of life, which is completely fine, except at the end of this set of episodes, you do see what seems to be a return to there being something that takes more than just a half of an episode to get through, which is trying to get the certification as a mage. I feel bad that we've left off kind of right in the middle of an arc. I've loved everything else. I love everything else we're going to be talking about today, but I want to start here. So a couple things to note. First off, we're in the middle of what seems to be a longer arc, which means we haven't yet had the time to really showcase these new characters that are being introduced. Thus far, I don't care about them. I find them to be the only time so far in the show that the sort of typical character types that we're building from, they're just not fleshed out for me in a way that I find compelling. And it's not, I don't think, just because we've split right in the middle of a certain part of the story, and I will be happy to say I'm wrong if that proves to be the case, and maybe I'll fall in love with these characters as soon as we continue on with this particular arc. But I do feel like even like the old man Vol, in the very short amount of time that we've gotten him, I fell in love with him. And I was like, no, he can't remember his wife's voice or her face. All those things that you care so much in such a short amount of time. So I think that's very possible. And it's not just that it's possible, it's that the show has done that time and time again. And it's taken the typical characters that you see so often in stories, the mage, the hero. It's taken these characters and it's done something really lovely and actually really interesting to follow with them, which is show them as people, show how these quests transform them or the ways that they don't always transform them. It's done so much with these frameworks that we've had in place before, whereas these characters just feel like caricatures, and given how well everything else has been done, I think it stands out, unfortunately, as a negative for me. But I'm very, very hopeful that I am going to be incorrect and that I will be reporting back in when I watch the next set and I'm like, never mind, it's just because we barely got to know them and now I really love these characters. I hope that's the case. But I think it's very possible that these will just kind of be misses for me and that this might be a part of the show that I skip over if I do rewatches. And on that note, let's now get into all the positives because there are so many to get through. So episode 13 is Aversion to One's Own Kind. It's kind of remarkable because I feel like we were with the new character that's introduced in this. I am watching the sub. I might have the pronunciation wrong, but I have been saying Sign. So we're introduced to Sign, and he was a very fun addition, and I can't believe, given how much it feels like he's been a part of the crew for so long, that he's already gone. And that's really sad because I liked him, and I'm assuming he's gonna make his way back into our characters' lives at some point. Oh, that's the other thing. I don't care about his friend. His friend to me who looks like if Zach from Final Fantasy VII had shorter hair. Kind of seems annoying, and I'm like, I mean, hang out with this crew instead, you know? A friend said he would come back in 3 years' time, and he didn't. So, kind of feel like this crew, they'll stick by you, man. You just gotta, you gotta be patient. We'll get to his departure later. When he is introduced, though, I did like a number of things within this episode. First off, the opening was so ridiculous, where he's just stuck in a swamp, and she's like, I don't want to get dirty, though. And so Frieren does end up helping him. I loved that as they were leaving, he tells them, like, hey, there's a lot of dangerous snakes and poisonous things, venomous things in the woods, so you gotta be careful. As soon as he said that, I wrote in my notes, will he get bit? Meaning Stark. And then, like, the next scene is him getting bit. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course he did. Really enjoyed how it showed the relationship between this character and his brother, and how he always perceived that he needed to stay because of how he interpreted the interaction he overheard when he was younger, and the idea that, like, oh, my brother gave up everything for me, so I have to give up everything for him, not realizing, one, the importance of actually communicating with your loved ones is kind of a significant thing to do, but also that his brother genuinely wanted to do this, whereas he has watched Sign go down this road of just feeling as if he's not living his life to the fullest and feeling like now it's too late, so he might as well just gamble and smoke and get drunk, and that's that, and pine after old women, I guess, So he joins the party, and I was like, oh, yay, fun. A very subtle thing that happens with how he is identifying Fern, going to him for something versus going to Frieren. And this is within the next episode. So you see this very cute little situation between Fern and Stark. They are quite cute. When she is mad because he didn't get her a present, and he meant to get her a present, but he also didn't know what she wanted, and then he felt like he couldn't ask. And, there's this whole little situation with the two of them. And when Fern is feeling unsettled by all of this, she doesn't really know how to navigate it, she ends up going to Sign instead of going to Frieren. And he identifies this, and he even notes this to Frieren, like, why would she go to me instead of you? She is accustomed to going to Hyter, and you're like, no, why do you have to keep reminding me of this? It's very well done. I'm not actually upset by it, but it's just emotional because I've said in the previous discussions that I am such a sucker for old people and kids, and he was cute. He was a cute old man. He was just a cute man in general. When you find out that he funded the orphanage too, I'm just like, come on, he's just so sweet and silly. But anyway, because of how much he was there for her and he gave her guidance, she's sort of now almost like imprinting onto a Sign, and that is why he's ending up giving her advice. Frieren's just kind of watching, which I do think is funny, but the way it plays out with Stark and Fern is also very cute. And Stark is, like, really nervous about whether she's gonna like the thing that he picked out. And then now they have these matching bracelets. And I think I just wrote in my note, matching bracelets. Oh, because I wrote matching bracelets and then a smiley face. And they're adorable. I love this whole party. This is why I'm sad that he's not a part of this crew anymore, because he was a lot of fun. It was like there was an additional adult in the room, but in some ways it almost felt like there was one adult in the room, because Frieren, it's not that she doesn't feel like a kid, but she doesn't really feel like him in that sense, so I feel like she's always just kind of like, hey, hi, yeah, what's going on? And then other times she's like, I just want to read my grimoires and sleep in. There were a few quotes that I found really funny within the episode. One, I really liked that he said about Stark, he's slow on the uptake. I don't know why, but that way of categorizing Stark was very amusing to me. I also wrote, I wonder why she's comparing me, who she's comparing me to, which we talked about. And then, children need grown-ups for emotional support. That was a quote from Hyter. I was like, aw. And then you see Frieren is always just kind of going and patting people on the head awkwardly, and it's always really precious when she does, so I also really quite enjoyed that. This plotline, though, is tied with something from the past between Frieren and Himmel, and specifically this ring that Himmel had gotten her, and I was like, okay, so I need to know. Don't tell me, I'll find out for myself. But there's a part of me that's like, okay, I saw that scene where they watched the meteor shower and she was like, okay, I'll see you in 50 years, bye. And then they're just like, you're leaving? And she's like, yep, see ya. And I was like, I need to know why nobody was like, I'm gonna be probably really old or dead. There was this idea of like, yeah, humans don't live very long. And also we have been getting pieces of how much she was alone and just how much of her life she actually lived with literally no one after her mentor died. But man, I just want to know why Himmel wasn't like, stay, please stay, and because I think he recognized that she didn't necessarily fully comprehend just how little time they had, but he obviously cared about her. I'll have to watch and find out, I guess. But you get this really sweet interaction where she picks out this ring and then he sees it and he's like, no, actually this is perfect. And he like basically proposes, but he doesn't say the words, but he's just like very dramatically and heroically, very nobly gets down on one knee, and it's this beautiful scene and it's cute and sweet between the two of them. And I'm like, but he's dead. Why are you doing this to me? This better end with them finding heaven, basically, and he's there and they can just chat and hang out and it's gonna be nice, except for I have such a fear, and I hope this isn't really what happens, but I have such a fear that this is gonna end with them getting to a place where there is no actual heaven, or at the very least there's not a concrete place where you can talk to those who have passed on, and it's just gonna be like this thing that you have to come to terms with. I'm really scared that that's where we're gonna end up, and if so, that would be so upsetting, so I'm bracing myself now just in case that's actually what happens. Anyway, within this plot line, part of the reason that Frieren loses her ring is because there's this beast that comes and picks up this little caravan that they're within. And I wrote in my notes, no, not the horse. And then I put, oh, okay, good, the horse is okay. I'm always worried about the horses. I'm like, okay, Attack on Titan already made me upset about the amount of horse deaths. Okay, so you can't do this to me again. There is a very sad quote, though, where Frieren, even though she's talking about the ring, which they do very conveniently get a spell that helps them find accessories. So you're like, yay. Even though that was very convenient, but that's fine. I'm fine with it. I just needed the happiness. I needed her to get her ring back. But she says that I'm used to losing things. And I'm like, no. And this plays into another episode within this batch where Fern is sick, and there is this whole discussion about, is Frieren treating her like a child? Is she just comforting her? But I noted for that moment, I do not like the idea of her watching what is basically like almost like a daughter to her. I don't like the idea of her watching her get older and die. Because obviously she's not dead yet. She's very young and currently healthy. She just got sick for a bit. But it's one thing to have companions that are the same age grow and die. But somebody who's like your child? I'm like, no, stop it. I don't like the idea of that. We'll get to that when we get to that episode. I did really love how sweet Fern was in helping her look for the ring, though. I thought that showed a lot about Fern's character. Fern is just very quietly very caring and very compassionate. She also, I think, has a lot of emotions, and she doesn't always know how to process them or how to articulate herself, but it's very clear and evident that she has such a good heart. So I did think it was very sweet that she was helping Frieren so much with that. But now segueing into the next episode, which does have almost like two plot lines in one. The first is the plant monster, and there's this curse that leads everybody to fall asleep. And luckily, Frieren is able to be awoken just in time to cast a spell, and it's a lot of trust building between these characters. I will say that the music throughout that whole progression of that fight was my favorite part about the whole thing. It was animated well also, but I especially really liked the music. But then we get into what I would say is like the more emotionally driven plot line, which is when you find this man who is like, hey, you look like my son, and then we have Stark having to stay for a while because they need the money, and he has to basically pretend to be this individual's son. There's a lot of things that happen with this that are a lot of fun or really sweet or cute. I did think, though, that the interactions between this man and his younger son and how he speaks of him and how you see Stark processing how he was treated as the younger son. He had this big brother. He felt like, I'm never going to be anything like him. I'm never going to be as good as him. And his father was, it would seem, pretty hard on him as well, or at least other people within their village were pretty hard on him. And this man is talking about how my son is not as skilled, but also he works really hard and I know he's going to be great. And Stark, I put in my notes that I just feel like he needed to hear that. But also when he tells him, like, well, you should tell him that. And he's like, I do tell him. And it gets to his head and it makes him not want to try as hard. And I thought that was kind of funny because it's like, yeah, I mean, you have people that are doing their best as parents or parental figures. And there are going to be pros and cons to a lot of different routes that you go in. But at the end of the day, this man clearly loves his son. It's so sad that him and his older son who passed away parted in anger. And I think it was mature of Stark to handle the situation as he did. But that whole section, I think, was very beautiful for his character, and I think was helpful in maybe him processing things and getting maybe almost like a sense of closure in a way, and then also growing, especially in his etiquette skills. The dance between him and Fern was beautifully done. I thought the music was pretty, the animation was great. It was just so lovely. And then, of course, there was a silly moment where Sign turns to Frieren and he specifically says, shall we dance? And she just says, I'm going to eat cake. The next episode I referenced earlier, but it is the one with Old Man Vole. I think this is one of my favorite episodes that we've had thus far, especially given how little time we actually spend with this plot. But I felt like he was so endearing and everything that he was experiencing was very sad. As soon as it first started, I was happy that Frieren had somebody that she could actually talk to, because she, as somebody who lives for so long, she does have to watch so many people. As she said, I lose so many things, but also humans as well, and loved ones in general. They're not all humans because, of course, it's a fantasy world with fancy races, but the fact that she had somebody to talk to and reminisce with, I thought was very, very sweet. But I was questioning because she first is telling him, like, oh, are you pretending to be old and senile just to try and throw people off, which it does seem like this is a practice of his. He obviously trips Stark, kind of poor Stark, for no reason. But he also talks about how, you know, you have to make sure that your enemy is surprised. That's a big element of combat. And then he's training Stark for a while. I did enjoy all of those things, but I was kind of consistently thinking, is it all an act? Because I do kind of wonder if some of this with his character, while it's maybe a trick he used to have up his sleeve before, I actually feel like maybe there's a chance that he's not actually remembering things as clearly as he used to. And this I thought was really beautifully done, because for anybody who, this is a very sensitive topic, and it's something that I've had some experience in as well, but when you have a loved one, especially who is elderly, and they are starting to maybe not have their memory work the way it did in the past, there are those moments of clarity, and oftentimes there are certain things that can essentially trigger memories. Like, for example, music actually can play a big role in triggering those moments of clarity. And I do feel like seeing certain people or having certain memories, certain conversations, you kind of can have these moments and then sometimes they can slip away. And so I feel that this episode really showcased that. Frieren having the chance to talk with him, I think really kind of awakened something in him. And even the statement about how, you know, it makes sense because he lived way longer than his wife because she was a human, that he couldn't really remember her face, he couldn't remember her voice. He knew that she loved this village, which is why he's been protecting it for so long. But then he has this dream after they've been talking about her and after a lot of his memories have sort of been vocalized in his conversations with Frieren. He finally could at least have a little bit more of his memories alive within his mind. And I do feel like that speaks to so much of what actually can happen with us. Having these moments of reminiscing can be so significant and so important for those of us who, you know, we're watching family members go through this, or the family members themselves are enduring this, and then these moments can provide something extremely comforting to them. And so much of this story is a lot about embracing life. I already touched on how I feel like even the formatting is fitting to the idea of the little things matter and trying to ensure that you don't let life pass you by. But for the things that are just truly in the past, I do feel like this is one of the first times that we've, outside of how Himmel and Heiter and Eisen played a role within Frieren's life, I feel like this is one of the first times we've seen the ways that memories are so significant and how our memories themselves help us further understand people. They help us make more informed decisions moving forward, and they are a part of our continued growth. The last thing I wrote for this episode, though, is less on the bittersweet and sad side and just silly, which is them saying they only have socially awkward members within their crew, which I thought was quite amusing. Then we segue into episode 17. You see Sign is debating whether or not he's going to stay or if he's finally going to go after his friend. And I know I was kind of hating on the idea of losing the crew, losing him as a part of the crew, but I also recognize that so much of what is important for him is rooted in like those first steps and realizing that he can go on these adventures and that he can do something new, and he just kind of needed that jump start, and I definitely think Frieren helped him with that. You also see the way that this played a role in how Himmel kind of helped her. But anyway, there are a lot of parallels between the two of them, and while I do think it's important for his character arc to pursue his friend and try to find him, also I'm just like, no, I don't want you to go though. From a personal standpoint, I miss him. Also, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but Fern's angry face is so funny. I love her little like pouting. I think it's funny. It's like the equivalent of, there's certain things that in various different shows, characters, there's like iconic things about expressions they make, but this reminds me a little bit of the weird face that Anya makes in Spy Family. For those that have watched Spy Family, she's like when she's like being sneaky face. It's so stupid and so funny every time, and I feel like the same thing is true of Fern with her angry face. But the plot line that occurs after Sign leaves is that you see Fern get sick. Before he leaves, he does get frustrated, Sign, because he really wants Fern and Stark to date, and you see that they got in basically a fight because if Stark was doing to Fern what she did about like, look at my hands are so cold, but then it turned out that she wasn't upset about that. She was upset because he seemed like so like she just like instinctively got mad because he felt so strong when he was like holding her. And then anyway, so they have this silly little argument, and Frieren's like, I don't know how to mediate, and then he has to mediate, and anyway, he's very upset they're not dating, and then eventually he parts ways with them, and you're like, but we get around to her getting sick pretty much immediately after. And you do see this very nice person allows them to stay there, and she is sort of being nursed back to health, and Frieren is finding the things that she needs to help ensure that she has something to take. Fern has something to take to feel better. But Fern does feel strange about Frieren holding her hand. Throughout this whole part, I definitely feel like Stark shows a lot of emotional intelligence. He is such a sweetheart of a character, which I know I already spent plenty of time talking about last week, but I do like how much he's sort of encouraging Frieren and telling her, like, I think maybe she was just embarrassed because I was there, but people really do need that support and that kindness, and he's just encouraging her to basically continue on and make sure that Fern recognizes that she is cared for, and maybe that's really all it takes. And you also see the way that Himmel was caring for Frieren when Frieren wasn't doing well, and maybe that's part of it. It's not just that Fern was, that was how Frieren would interact with her when she was little, but also it's how Frieren has received care in the past. But also there was a quote that I thought was lovely, which is just, people probably need more emotional support. To continue with the cuteness, you see Frieren telling Stark, when you get sick, I'll hold your hand. And a part of me is like, I need to see this now. I need to see her being adorable with Stark. But that episode, despite the fact that I'm sad that Sign's no longer with us, I did really enjoy those moments. As I said at the beginning, I didn't really want to end on a negative, but I'll just very quickly go through a couple things I wrote for this next episode. There aren't a lot because I'm kind of waiting to see where this story goes. But I did at the beginning write, quote, old hag, because Frieren tells Stark, don't forget, I did not forget that you called me an old hag, which I thought was funny. And then we're just getting our mage certification. I did really like this city itself and these libraries with all these grimoires and the way that the lamplight is within the city. I liked all of that. I liked the setting quite a bit. I also do quite like the birds that they're supposed to be catching within this trial. And I thought that the monster that shows up toward the end of this episode was really cool and the design was awesome. I do look forward to seeing the conclusion of this arc as well as just more of this story. But as always, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you later. Bye.